Most of the campaign is focused on the House of Representatives, where governments are formed. But there's the Senate as well, an important check on government power. This election, there's a Melbourne Cup field from Queensland. 65 people are vying for our state's 6 Senate spots. We can't talk to everybody, but today we gathered 5 candidates at Brisbane's Powerhouse to discuss the Senate race. Quick introductions before we begin. We have today with us Liberal Senator Ian Macdonald, Labor Senator Claire Moore, Democrat Senator Andrew Bartlett, Greens candidate Larissa Waters and Independent candidate James Baker. First though, to you, Senator Ian Macdonald. To the surprise of many, the Coalition won a Senate majority in 2004, allowing the government to introduce its controversial work choices legislation. Is that Senate majority a liability in this Senate race, given that most Australians prefer it when governments don't have control of the Senate?
I think most Australians want to see the economy going well, they want to see jobs created, and they will get that with a Howard Costello government. We want to be there to support them. We have the team to do that with Sue Boyce, Ron Boswell and myself, and we want to be in there.
So the Senate majority is fine then?
The Senate majority is important to make sure that that good economic government continues. Also, it's important to make sure that we don't have wall-to-wall Labor governments in every state and territory and in the National Parliament. If the opinion polls are to be believed, and I don't believe them, but if they are, then a government control or a Liberal national control Senate will be the only thing that will stand between Australia and increases in the GST and many other of the strange policies that the Labor-Green Accord will bring to this country. All
right, well, Senator Claire Moore, traditionally in Queensland, voters always give the Liberals 2, Labor 2. Do you believe, as the polls and some pundits suggest, that Labor here is looking to pick up 3 Senate spots in Queensland this time round?
I think that, as we'll all say, no one believes polls. It's part of that process. But in terms of the process of people thinking about it, I think your opening comment about people being a bit surprised last time is quite true. And there will be, I think, more consideration about how the vote will go this time. And people will be aware of the attempts to scare them, as we've just heard from Senator Macdonald, scare the population into thinking what will happen if there would be a change. I think that what must happen is people must consider their futures, look at true representative government, and that's what we're offering. And we're trying to ensure that whatever government comes through, it will be one that will be strong and one that will be responsive. And we think that a Rudd government with a Rudd responsive and effective program that is not out of touch and is working well for the community is what we're seeking.
Well, Senator Andrew Bartlett, the Democrats have often positioned themselves to be the conscience of the Senate. But in 2004, you lost Queensland Senator John Cherry, and you polled, I think, only about 2.1% of the vote. You're at a real risk at this election of losing the Democrat Senate spot in Queensland.
Well, Queenslanders saw last time what happened when you lose the Democrat seat. That was the seat that gave the Coalition control of the Senate and allowed them to push through extreme changes to legislation such as work choices, and also allowed them to close down a lot of the scrutiny of what government does, because the Democrats haven't just been the conscience, we've been that insurance against the actions of the government of the day, the opportunity for the people who are affected by the decisions of government to have a say through Senate committee processes.
So does the Coalition Senate majority work in your favour and against the Liberal Party and the National Party?
Well, I think the Coalition Senate majority works against the interests of the people of Queensland, and that's the key issue. And that's why there needs to be a lot more focus on the choice people make in the Senate at this election, regardless of how they vote in the House of Representatives.
Right, well, Larissa Waters, you're the Greens candidate in Queensland. With climate change in the national psyche now, more than ever, are the Greens positioned to, if you like, cash in on that?
Well, we're certainly feeling very hopeful, and there is a very large level of concern in Queensland, particularly about the impacts of climate change. We've got the Great Barrier Reef, which is very susceptible to temperature rises. We've got the wet tropics. We've got a lot of coastal cities. So people are rightly concerned about the impacts of climate change, and they're very disappointed that there's basically no difference between the 2 big parties on this issue. The government's not taking climate change seriously, and the Labor Party's policy still refuses to set a short-term target. So I think people are looking towards the Greens for some serious action on climate change, as well as all of our other policies.
Right, well, James Baker, you're an independent running in this election, but it must be said that you were an ex-National Party member who ran for pre-selection. But how hard is it to challenge the dominance of the major parties and win a seat in the Senate?
Well, there's no doubt it's tough, but there's no point in complaining about it either. You've just got to get in there and do it.
But is it impossible though?
Well, some would say, some have said to me, what are you doing? It's impossible to do. But A, if I thought it was impossible, I wouldn't be doing it. But B, you can get in there, you can contribute to the debate, and I think with the preferential system, you certainly can have a chance as an independent. We've seen it happen before. We've seen Brian Harradine get in there, and he made an enormous impact on the Australian political scene as an independent senator. And certainly in the House of Representatives, there are many independent candidates or independent members of Parliament. Peter Andren, who was laid to rest today, very sadly. You have Bob Katter, you have Tony Windsor. And if you lined them up against any of the backbenchers in the major parties, most people would be able to point out those independents and say, yes, I've seen them before, I know them, because they punch above their weight as independents, and that's what I'm trying to do.
All right, well, let me ask everybody here as a group then. What are the issues for the Senate race in Queensland, as opposed to the issues nationally? Are there specific issues that you campaign on in Queensland as senators?
Well, good representation, and my team with Sue Boyce, a disability advocate, a woman, business person, Ron Boswell, very well known for what he's done in this state in rural industries, myself coming from the north. In fact, I think I'm the only candidate this time round who's not from Brisbane. And, you know, we've got a balanced team, but importantly, John, the real issue in this campaign is that it could be, if the polls are to be believed, and I don't, as I say, the Senate, a government-controlled, a Liberal National Party-controlled Senate, is the only thing that stands between Australia and wall-to-wall Labor government, state, territory and national. And once that happens, with whatever the deal the Greens have done with Labor, whatever Labor's agreed with the Greens to get their preferences right around Australia, shut down the Bowen coalfield towns, whatever. That's going to be pretty scary if you've got every government in Australia controlled by the Labor Party.
Well, Senator Moore, you're grinning and grimacing there.
Again, it's also predictable in terms of the process.
It's true, though.
But our terms,
well, it's true.
The Labor Senate team is actually working in Queensland to ensure that people in Australia, and Queensland in particular, have a strong Rudd Labor government. That's what we're part of. It's not a separate campaign.
Will the Labor Party promise not to disendorse Labor Party MPs and senators who vote against the dictates of the party hierarchy? Can you give that guarantee to people?
You cannot talk about dictates and process. We have a very strong public policy. When people run as Labor candidates, they embrace their party and they're looking at strong, effective government.
So if they cross the floor, they get kicked out?
That's not automatic. The process goes through caucus. We have our decisions within caucus. People know what the Labor Party stands for. They know what we'll do. And process is about kicking people out. It's not the appropriate way to do it.
Well, tell that to Kate Malloy.
According to Peter Garrett, he says you're going to change all your policies after the election.
Well, we know that was just a beat-up, and I don't think it's worth talking about.
He said it.
Well, the key issue for the Senate is a body that can work independently of the government of the day, so you don't get distracted by all the flim-flam and you know, the sort of nonsensical point scoring that people throw around election time. There's a whole range of issues that are balance of power issues. Workplace relations is a key balance of power issue. The reasons why work choices is an issue this election is not because Mr Howe was the Prime Minister, it's because we got control of the Senate and you lost that balancing role that the Democrats were able to play. What we do about climate change is a key balance of power issue. What happens with nuclear energy is a key balance of power issue. Economic management is a key balance of power issue. They're all important, but the key overarching reason why the Senate contest is so important is to provide that insurance. If you do have a change of government and you've got wall-to-wall Labor governments, you'd still have the Senate there as that piece of insurance against what they do.
But the Senate fails to live up to